Alpha's daughter only spoke to animals, until she met the Omega who could hear them too. High in the Mooncrest Mountains, where mist curled around jagged peaks like silver smoke, the Alpha King's castle rose like a shadowed fortress. Its towers gleamed faintly under the moon, but the stones held a weighty silence, one that spoke of power, of command, and of lives bound by rules older than memory. Within its walls lived Lyra, the daughter of the Alpha King, a young woman whose presence was as quiet as the snowfall that blanketed the highlands. But Lyra was not silent because she wished to be. She could not speak the words humans use, not a single one. From the day she was born, her voice had refused to answer the world of men. Instead, the wild had taught her its own language. She spoke with the wolves that prowled the high cliffs, the crows that circled the towers, the foxes that padded through the underbrush. They answered her in ways humans could never understand, and she had grown to trust them more than anyone else. The Alpha King, her father, ruled with strength and pride, but he never truly understood his daughter. He saw her gift as strange, even dangerous. Some nights he would watch her through the lattice windows of the castle, seeing her kneel in the gardens as a black raven perched on her shoulder, or as a pair of wolves nuzzled her hands. And every time he wondered quietly what power could lie in a child who did not speak to humans at all. One night, under a sky full of stars so bright it almost hurt to look at them, Lyra slipped past the castle walls. She moved carefully, silent as a shadow, her cloak brushing the ground. She had learned the safest paths through the forests that clung to the mountains like a living blanket. The animals were waiting. Two wolves emerged from the trees, their eyes glowing in the moonlight. Lyra knelt and they pressed their heads to her palms. "You came," she whispered, not in words humans could hear, but in the way the forest understood. Her heart beat quickly. She had felt a new presence in the woods today, a presence that did not belong. It had been watching her from a distance, and now curiosity pulled her forward. The deeper she walked, the thicker the mist became. Shadows twisted between the trees, and the leaves whispered warnings in the language only the wild knew. Lyra's eyes darted to a movement ahead. She froze. A figure stepped from behind an ancient oak, tall and cloaked, his boots soft on the moss. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. It was rare for humans to venture this far into the forbidden woods, and rarer still for them to remain calm when confronted by the untamed. "You hear them?" the figure asked, his voice low and even. Lyra tilted her head. He meant the animals. Her wolf pack growled softly behind her and the crows circled above, their wings cutting through the mist. The stranger did not flinch. "I hear," he said again, "every word." Lyra's eyes widened. No human had ever understood her, not even her father. She stayed silent, unsure whether she should flee or stay. The man's face emerged from the shadow of his hood, sharp and unreadable. His eyes were dark, deep, but not unkind. Something in him radiated both caution and courage. "My name is Kale," he said. "I am not like the others." The wolves relaxed slightly. They did not growl, they only watched. Lyra, for the first time in her life, felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps this stranger could understand her, not as a curiosity or a burden, but as a person. "Why are you here?" she asked, not with words but with a gesture as she extended her hand to the nearest wolf, then to him. Kale knelt, mirroring her action. "I was drawn here," he said softly, "by them and by you." Lyra's heart thumped painfully. Drawn to her, by him. She had never felt anyone draw near her in this way. She looked at him carefully, sensing no deceit, only a strange, magnetic pull. For hours they walked together through the forest. Kale never spoke over the animals, never tried to force her to use words. Instead, he listened. He watched the crows dip and dance around her. He watched the foxes curl near her feet. He nodded when she pointed toward danger or curiosity, and he seemed to know instinctively how to move so as not to disturb the fragile balance of the wild. "Why can you hear them?" Lyra finally asked, her voice a soft vibration in her chest that only she and the stranger could feel. Kale's eyes darkened. I do not know, he admitted. I have always been like this. I was taught to hide it, to fear it. Humans fear what they cannot control. Lyra studied him. There was sadness there and something else, something unspoken that tugged at her heart. Perhaps he was alone like her, and yet, unlike her, he could choose to hide, to walk among humans unseen. She could not. Her gift was her curse and her solace all at once. Night deepened and the mist thickened around them. Lyra felt a cold prickle at the back of her neck. The animals were restless. The crows cawed sharply, the wolves bristled. Something was coming, something dark. Something ancient. A shadow moved between the trees. Lyra froze and Kale's hand found hers instinctively. He did not let go. The shadow grew closer, taking shape, and Lyra's stomach dropped. It was not human. It was not wolf. It was something older, something that had existed long before the mountains were crowned with stone towers. Its eyes glowed like embers, and its presence made the wind itself seem to hesitate. "Stay behind me," Kale said quietly. His tone was gentle, but it carried authority. Lyra's wolf pack growled in warning, the crows shrieked, and even the foxes crouched low. The shadow paused at the edge of the clearing. It tilted its head as though curious, as though testing the two intruders. Lyra's chest tightened. She wanted to speak, to call the animals forward, to fight, but fear rooted her to the spot. Kale stepped forward, unafraid. "You will not harm her," he said, voice low and steady. The shadow shifted, and a cold, whispering wind cut through the trees. Lyra felt the pull of the forest around her, the power of the animals lending her courage. She raised her hand, not to strike, but to call. The wolves stepped forward, the crows swooped, and even the foxes leapt beside her. Kale stood with her, his presence steady, unflinching. For a moment the shadow seemed surprised. Then it recoiled, as if realizing this bond was stronger than it had anticipated. And then, as suddenly as it had appeared, it vanished into the mist. Lyra sank to her knees, trembling. Her hands shook as she touched the wolf's fur. Kale knelt beside her, silent for a moment, then spoke. "You are stronger than you know," he said. Lyra looked at him, really looked, and saw no fear, no judgment, just understanding. Something inside her shifted, a tiny spark of hope that perhaps she was not as alone as she had always believed. I have never met anyone like you," she said softly. Not with words for humans, but in the language of her heart and the forest that understood her completely. Kale smiled faintly, the shadows of the trees flickering across his face. "And I have never met anyone like you." The forest fell silent again, but it felt different now, alive with possibility. Lyra and Kale walked slowly back toward the edge of the woods, side by side, neither speaking aloud. The animals moved around them, a living shield, a chorus of quiet power. When the castle walls appeared in the distance, Lyra hesitated. The Alpha King's domain was safe, but it was also a prison. And now Kale had seen her, had understood her in a way no human ever had. "I will return," she whispered to the wind, not knowing if Kale could hear or if the mountains themselves would carry her promise. Kale caught her gaze. "I will be waiting," he said. A cold wind blew through the valley as the mist curled once more around the peaks. Somewhere deep in the forest, an unseen presence stirred. The shadow had not forgotten. It had not gone. Lyra did not know what was coming, but for the first time she felt a strength she had never known. She was not alone. And perhaps in Kale she had found someone who could walk between worlds, the world of humans and the world of the wild, without fear. And so, the silent princess and the mysterious Omega returned to their separate paths, each carrying a spark of hope, a bond that was as fragile as it was extraordinary. The forest whispered around them, and the stars above the mountains glimmered with secrets yet to be revealed. And somewhere in the shadows beyond the trees, the darkness watched, waiting for the day it would rise again. The morning sun cast pale gold over the Mooncrest Mountains, but the castle walls held their usual cold shadow. Within those walls, the Alpha King moved like a storm in human form, strict, sharp and unyielding. He had learned that his daughter, Lyra, had ventured beyond the castle walls the night before. The whispers of his guards, the paw prints in the garden, and the disturbance of the animals all spoke of it. And one truth burned like fire in his chest. Someone had followed her, someone who was not from the lands of his pack. Lyra, meanwhile, sat beneath a towering oak at the edge of the forbidden woods. The wolves padded around her, their tails flicking gently, their ears alert. The crows perched on twisted branches, watching her like silent sentinels. Her hands trembled slightly, but her heart still carried the memory of Kale's presence, the Omega who had heard her, who had understood her without judgment. Kale had vanished before dawn, leaving only the faint scent of smoke and earth. Lyra had wanted to call after him, but fear held her voice, the old fear of punishment from her father, from the rules she could never truly break. Hours passed, and the forest around her seemed quieter than usual. The leaves whispered warnings, the wind carried cautious notes of unease, and even the sun, breaking through the mist, seemed wary of what lingered beyond the trees. Lyra rose slowly, walking back toward the castle, but her mind lingered on Kale. Who was he, truly? Why could he hear her, understand the animals as she did? And why did the shadow from the forest seem to follow wherever he walked, even if he did not know it yet? Back in the castle, the Alpha King's chambers were a study of steel and stone, maps covering the walls, wolf pelts stretched across the floor, trophies of his strength displayed like warnings. He sat in his chair, hands clasped, jaw tight. His thoughts were not of battles or alliances, but of Lyra and the stranger who had dared approach her. "Father," one of his advisors said cautiously, bowing, "the girl, she was seen in the forest, and a man cloaked followed her. No one knows who he is. He has left by dawn, but what?" The Alpha King's voice was sharp as a blade. "But he did not flee as an ordinary intruder. The animals, they obeyed him, or at least did not attack him. It is unnatural." The Alpha King's eyes narrowed. "Unnatural, yes, but the girl has always been strange. A gift or a curse. Perhaps this man seeks what is hers, or perhaps he will destroy it." Meanwhile, Lyra's walk back was interrupted by a strange feeling. The air felt heavier, almost as if the forest itself had drawn its breath. She paused, and the wolves growled softly. The crows circled more tightly above her, their wings beating an anxious rhythm. Her instincts pulled her toward a small clearing she had never visited before. There the ground was littered with ancient stones, carved with symbols she could not read, symbols older than the castle itself. The air hummed with power, and for a moment Lyra felt a strange connection to something unseen. Then a voice broke through the quiet, low and almost bitter. "You should not be here." Lyra spun around, her heart racing. Kale emerged from the shadows, his hood down this time. His dark eyes were sharp, troubled. "This place is dangerous," he said. "I had hoped you would stay closer to safety." "I could not," Lyra said, her hands brushing against a wolf's fur for courage. "I had to see." Kale studied her quietly. "There are things here, things your father does not know, and things I fear he never could understand." Lyra nodded. Somehow she understood him. She did not need his words, the forest, the stones, the creatures. They whispered the same warnings he did. Kale knelt beside a circle of stones. "Long ago," he began, his voice low, "a curse was placed on your line. Not on you alone, but on the blood of the Alpha Pack. It has slept for generations, waiting until now. And I fear your gift, your voice, has awakened it." Lyra froze. "A curse?" she asked, her eyes wide. She wanted to speak aloud, but the words failed. She let the animals react for her. The wolves lowered their heads, the foxes pressed close, the crows cawed softly, uneasy. Kale nodded. "Yes, the curse feeds on fear, on isolation, on doubt. It grows stronger when bonds are broken, when secrets are kept. Your father's anger, the walls that surround you, even your silence, they make it stronger." Lyra's chest tightened. She had always felt different, alone in a world she could not fully speak to. But to hear it named, to know that her very nature could draw danger, it made her stomach twist. "And you?" she asked quietly. Why are you here?" Kale looked away, eyes shadowed. "I was sent away once, accused of things I did not do. I learned to hide, to survive, to listen without speaking. But the forest called me here. Perhaps it was fate. Perhaps it was you." Lyra's gaze softened. She wanted to reach for him, but her hands trembled. The forest, the animals, even the stones beneath them seemed to hold their breath. Before she could react, a movement at the edge of the clearing made both of them tense. The shadow from before, the dark, whispering presence, was there again. It slithered between the trees like smoke, watching, waiting. Kale stood, placing himself slightly in front of Lyra. "Do not speak. Do not call. Let it come to us carefully." Lyra's wolves growled, their fur bristling, but Kale raised his hand. The animals fell silent, responding to him in a way Lyra had never seen. Even the crows halted their circling, hovering in uneasy balance above them. The shadow moved closer. It whispered like wind through dry leaves, and Lyra felt it brushing against her thoughts, probing her fears. But Kale remained steady, his hand brushing hers in silent reassurance. Then it paused, as if it recognized something. Something in their bond, something older than the mountains themselves. Lyra's heart raced. She did not understand fully what Kale was doing, but she trusted him. She focused on the animals, on the forest, on the silent rhythm that connected them all. She felt the power in her gift, the strength she had never dared to embrace. The shadow hesitated, then receded into the mist, leaving only a faint chill in the air. Lyra let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. Kale did not relax fully, but he nodded. "You are stronger than you know," he said again, softer this time. Lyra looked at him, truly looked, and felt a strange warmth in her chest. For the first time she felt a sense of equality with another human, not fear, not curiosity, but a bond. "We must be careful," Kale said. "Your father, he cannot understand this, and the curse, it will not rest if it senses weakness." Lyra's mind went to the castle. Her father, strict and unforgiving, would never allow her to meet Kale again. He would see the bond as a threat. But now she felt something different, a fire in her chest. She would not hide forever. Kale extended his hand. "Come with me," he said. "I will show you what you can do, what you are capable of." Lyra hesitated. Fear and excitement battled within her. Could she trust him completely? Could she step beyond the forest, beyond the rules that had bound her life? Then the crows cried sharply, a warning. The shadow had returned, not from the forest, but closer, watching, waiting, patient. Its hunger had not diminished. Lyra swallowed her fear and took Kale's hand. "I trust you," she said, her gesture stronger than words could convey. Kale nodded, and together they stepped deeper into the forest, the animals surrounding them like a living shield. And as they moved, the shadow lingered behind, silent, knowing, waiting. It had tasted the bond between them, and it would not forget. The sun dipped lower behind the mountains, and the mist thickened. In the distance, the Alpha King's gaze was already turning toward the forest, suspicion and anger coiling like a serpent in his heart. The castle would not stay silent much longer, and soon, the choices Lyra made would bring danger closer than ever before. Lyra felt it in her chest, a fluttering, a fear, a thrill. The forest, the animals, Kale, all were guiding her toward a truth she had not yet imagined. And beyond it, the darkness waited, patient, ancient, and unyielding. The castle loomed like a silent giant over the Mooncrest Mountains. Its stones gleamed pale in the morning light, but inside, the halls were heavy with tension. Lyra walked carefully, her steps light on the stone floors, her eyes wary. She had returned from the forest, but the memory of Kale's presence lingered like a warm fire in the cold air. The Alpha King's chambers were already filled with advisors and guards, their faces sharp with worry. The moment Lyra entered, the room grew silent. The Alpha King stood at the head of the hall, his expression as cold as the walls themselves. "You left the castle last night," he said, his voice low but firm. "Alone, or with a stranger. Who is he?" Lyra's hands trembled slightly, but she did not speak. Humans had their language, but her voice could not reach them. Instead, she gestured toward the window, toward the edge of the forest, then toward her chest. She tried to show him that the stranger was different, that he had not harmed her. But the Alpha King's gaze hardened. "You do not understand," he said sharply. "No one who approaches you unbidden is to be trusted, especially not outsiders." Lyra's heart ached, but she stayed calm. She had learned that her father's anger was like the mountain wind, powerful, unavoidable, but not permanent. Still, she felt the need to protect Kale. She knew that revealing him completely would only bring him danger. "He is not like the others," she gestured, her eyes pleading, but the words remained trapped in her throat. The Alpha King's eyes narrowed. "Not like the others," he repeated. "You bring riddles and shadows into my home. I will not allow it. If he returns—" His voice trailed off, but the threat was clear. Lyra lowered her head, but she did not feel fear. She felt determination. Kale had saved her, had understood her, had seen something in her that even her father could not. She would not abandon him. Later that day, the forest whispered to her again, pulling her toward the shadows. She followed instinct, moving carefully, until she reached the clearing where Kale had first shown her the ancient stones. Kale was already there, sitting quietly among the moss and leaves. His eyes lifted when he sensed her approach. "You should not have come back so soon," he said gently. "I had no choice," Lyra replied, her gestures slow but deliberate. "My father will not understand, but I needed to know more about the curse about us." Kale's expression darkened. "The curse, it is older than your family. Older than the mountains. It feeds on silence, on fear, on separation, and it is stronger than I realized." Lyra knelt beside him, touching the moss-covered stones. "I feel it," she said, her chest rising and falling with quickened breaths. "In the forest, in the air, it waits." Kale nodded. "Yes, and the shadow, it is patient. It watches, it learns, it will test us, it will try to separate us, and it will use your father's fear against you." Lyra's hands clenched. "I will not let it," she whispered, not with words for humans, but with the language of the wild, the animals, and the forest. "I will not let it take him or us." Kale looked at her, his eyes softening. "I cannot promise safety, only that I will fight with you, and that we will face it together." For hours they walked through the forest, practicing, exploring, learning. Kale showed her how to listen to the subtle language of the animals, how to feel the pulse of the forest, and how to focus her energy so that the shadow could not sense her fear. Lyra responded quickly, her gift stronger than Kale had anticipated. She could hear the whispers of the trees, the heartbeat of the wolves, and even the faint murmur of the ancient stones beneath the earth. But as evening fell, the forest grew colder, and the mist rolled in like a living thing. The shadow returned, moving silently between the trees. Lyra froze, sensing its hunger, its ancient patience. Kale stepped in front of her, his hand brushing hers, grounding her. "Do not show fear," he whispered. "It will feed on it." Lyra's hands trembled, but she focused, calling to the wolves and the crows. They responded, forming a circle around them, a shield of living creatures. The shadow moved closer, hissing like wind over jagged rocks, circling them, probing, testing their connection. Suddenly it struck, not with claws or teeth, but with a force that pushed through the mind, a cold, whispering terror that made the forest itself seem to shiver. Lyra felt her heart freeze, her breath catch. But Kale's grip on her hand was steady, and his presence reminded her of her own strength. "Focus," he said. "You are not alone." Lyra closed her eyes, reaching deep into herself, into the rhythm of the forest, into the pulse of the wolves, the wings of the crows, and the ancient power of the stones. She felt Kale beside her, their energy intertwining, creating a bond stronger than fear. The shadow recoiled, its voice a hiss in the air. It had underestimated them. It had not expected a connection so strong, so pure, so unbroken by doubt or isolation. Slowly it retreated, leaving only a chill in the trees. Lyra exhaled, her chest heaving, her hands still trembling. Cale looked at her with something she had not seen before, pride, admiration, and a quiet affection that made her heart ache in a new, strange way. "You did it," he said softly. "You are stronger than even you realize." Lyra smiled faintly, a mixture of relief and newfound confidence. She realized something important. Her gift was not a curse alone. It was a power, and with Cale, she could learn to use it. She could protect herself, her father, and the forest. But their moment of quiet was shattered by a distant cry. Lyra's wolves growled, the crows screamed, and Cale's eyes darkened. The cry came from the castle, the Alpha King's fortress, and it carried the weight of anger, suspicion, and an authority that brooked no opposition. "We cannot stay," Cale said, rising. "Your father has sensed something. He will come for us, and he will not understand. Not yet." Lyra nodded, but a pang of fear struck her chest. She had grown to trust Cale, to rely on him. But if her father discovered their bond, if the Alpha King tried to take her away, the shadow would have another chance. And this time it would not hesitate. They ran through the forest, the mist swirling around them, the animals guiding their path. Lyra felt a thrill and a terror she had never known. For the first time she was not just surviving, she was choosing, acting, and fighting. Her gift, once a quiet solace, was now a weapon and a shield. As night fell fully, they reached the edge of a cliff overlooking the valley below. The lights of the castle twinkled in the distance, small and fragile against the dark mountains. Lyra stood at the edge, wind in her hair, and looked at Cale. "We will have to return," she said, her gestures firm. "But next time we must be ready. The shadow will not wait." Cale nodded, his eyes reflecting the moonlight. "And your father, he will watch, and he will decide whether he can trust what he does not understand." Lyra's heart tightened. She had felt alone for so long, misunderstood and silent. Now she had found someone who understood her, someone who could hear her, who could stand with her. But she also knew the dangers ahead, her father's anger, the curse, the shadow, and the unknown forces that stalked the forest. The wolves pressed close, sensing her unease, and the crows circled overhead. Even the foxes seemed to watch, their eyes sharp in the darkness. Lyra took a deep breath, drawing strength from the bond around her. She would not let fear rule her. She would fight, she would learn, and she would protect what was hers. As they turned back toward the forest path, a chilling sound carried on the wind, a whisper, cold and patient, that made Lyra shiver. It was not the animals, not the wind, but something else, something older, something that knew their bond and sought to destroy it. Lyra's eyes met Cale's. "It is coming," she whispered, her voice a vibration only he could feel. Cale's hand found hers again, steady, grounding. "And we will be ready," he said. But deep in the shadows, the presence that had haunted them from the beginning waited, patient, watching, hungry, and it knew that the next encounter would not be as forgiving. The forest held its breath, the wolves growled softly, and the night stretched on, filled with danger, promise, and the stirring of an ancient curse that would test the strength of both the silent princess and the Omega who could hear her. The Mooncrest Mountains were silent under a pale silver moon. The castle stood like a sentinel, its towers stretching into the mist, but the forest below pulsed with life. Wolves padded through the underbrush, crows circled overhead, and the foxes darted silently between the trees. The animals knew that tonight was different. Tonight, the silent princess and the Omega who could hear her would face the shadow that had haunted them, the ancient curse that had whispered through her family for generations, and the fury of the Alpha King. Lyra stood at the edge of the clearing where Cale had first taught her to channel her gift. The stones were cold beneath her fingers, carved with symbols she had come to understand as conduits of old power. Her breath formed small clouds in the cool night air. She could feel the forest around her, the animals waiting, the trees bending slightly as if acknowledging her presence. Kale approached quietly, his steps deliberate, his eyes scanning the shadows. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. Lyra nodded. "I am. I know I have to face it, all of it." Kale smiled faintly, placing a hand on hers. "And I will be with you, always." They began the ritual the ancient stones had whispered to them. Lyra focused on the pulse of the forest, the rhythm of the animals, and the energy flowing through the stones. She could feel the power deep in her bones, rising, intertwining with Kale's presence beside her. Together, they were stronger than they had ever been alone. But the shadow was patient. It had waited, watched, and it struck just as the ritual reached its peak. Darkness swept through the clearing, chilling the air, twisting the mist, and making the trees groan as though alive. "You cannot stop me," the shadow hissed, its voice like wind through dry bones. "You are too weak. You are alone." Lyra's heart thundered. She could feel fear rising, but Kale's hand squeezed hers. The animals formed a tighter circle around them, their energy responding to her own. Lyra took a deep breath, and then she spoke, not in words humans could hear, but in the language of the forest, the animals, and the stones. "Together," she said, the sound vibrating through the clearing, stronger than she imagined. The wolves answered with a low, deep howl, the crows cawed sharply, and the foxes yipped in rhythm. Kale joined her, his energy flowing into hers, creating a bond that filled the clearing with light and warmth. The shadow shrieked, recoiling against the force of their unity. It had not expected their connection to be so strong, so pure, so unbroken by doubt or fear. Slowly it began to dissolve, retreating into the mist, leaving only a whisper of menace behind. Lyra fell to her knees, exhausted but triumphant. Kale knelt beside her, brushing hair from her face. "You did it," he said softly. "You have more power than even you know." Lyra looked up at him, feeling a rush of gratitude, affection, and something deeper. "We did it together," she said, the forest around them pulsing in agreement. But their victory was short-lived. From the forest edge, a figure emerged, tall and imposing. The Alpha King had come, his expression a storm of fury, worry, and disbelief. "Lyra," he called, his voice echoing through the trees. "What have you done? Who is this man?" Lyra stood slowly, her gaze steady. She gestured toward Kale, then toward the clearing, the animals, and the stones. The Alpha King's eyes followed her movements, and for the first time he understood the depth of her gift, the bond she shared with Kale, and the power that had protected her. Kale bowed his head slightly, showing respect but not fear. "Alpha King," he said, his voice calm. "I am Kale. I am here to protect Lyra and to help her understand her gift. We faced the shadow together, and together we prevented it from harming your pack." The Alpha King's jaw tightened. He had always ruled through strength, fear, and control. But as he watched his daughter, standing tall and radiant despite the danger, and Kale, standing firmly by her side, he realized something he had not before. She was no longer a child to protect blindly. She was powerful, and she had chosen a companion who respected and strengthened her, not one who would dominate or harm her. "Do you swear," the Alpha King said slowly, his voice low, "that you will use this power for the pack and not for yourselves?" Lyra met his gaze. "I swear," she said, her voice strong in the language of humans, though her heart and her gift carried a deeper truth. Kale mirrored her oath, nodding. The Alpha King studied them, then slowly exhaled. "Very well," he said. "I will not interfere, but know this power carries responsibility. Do not forget that, Lyra, and you, Kale, be worthy of her trust." Lyra's chest swelled with relief and pride. The Alpha King's acknowledgement was more than she had ever dared hope for. Kale's presence beside her gave her courage, and the bond they had built was stronger than any fear, stronger than any shadow. The forest seemed to sigh in relief. The animals circled them once more, their movements a dance of celebration and protection. The stones beneath their feet pulsed faintly, as if approving the balance restored. But even in this moment of victory, Lyra knew the world was vast and the shadows were patient. The curse had been weakened, the shadow had retreated, but ancient forces were still awake, still aware of her gift. Kale turned to her, his expression soft. "We have one tonight," he said, "but there will always be more. We must stay vigilant, and we must stay together." Lyra nodded. "I will not let anything separate us," she said, the forest and animals echoing her vow. For the first time, she spoke a full sentence aloud, directed to Kale, not the animals. "Thank you for understanding me." Kale smiled, the shadows of the trees dancing across his face. "And thank you for letting me." The Alpha King watched quietly, the anger and suspicion he had carried for so long replaced by a quiet awe. He saw his daughter not as a fragile child, but as a leader, a protector, and someone who could bridge the worlds of humans and the wild. Perhaps, he thought, this was the gift his ancestors had never understood. As the night deepened, Lyra and Kale walked through the forest together, their hands brushing, their steps synchronized. The animals moved around them, loyal and aware, and the stones whispered softly beneath their feet. They had faced the darkness, survived the curse, and forged a bond that neither fear nor shadow could break. Yet in the distance, high in the peaks beyond the mist, a faint light flickered. It was small, distant, but it pulsed with a rhythm that echoed through the mountains. Lyra felt it in her chest, a new pull, a new challenge, and a reminder that their journey was only beginning. She looked at Kale, determination shining in her eyes. "Whatever comes," she said, "we face it together." Kale squeezed her hand, a silent promise. "Together," he echoed. And as the moonlight bathed the forest, the animals surrounding them, the stones glowing faintly, Lyra realized something profound. Her voice, once silent, once hidden, was now a bridge. A bond between the world of humans, the world of the wild, and the unseen forces that shaped her life. She was no longer afraid. She was no longer alone. The shadow had retreated, the curse had been weakened, and the Alpha King had begun to see what his daughter could become. But even as they celebrated, the mountains whispered secrets of their own. Ancient forces, patient and watchful, lingered beyond the peaks, waiting for the next chapter in the tale of the silent princess and the Omega who could hear her. Lyra and Kale walked forward, side by side, their bond unbreakable, their hearts filled with courage, and their spirits ready for whatever the world might send. The forest, the animals, and the stones all seemed to recognize it. The future had changed, and the voice of the Alpha's daughter would echo far beyond the mountains. The night stretched on, silent yet alive, carrying the promise of adventure, unity, and the enduring power of trust, courage, and love. And in that silence, a new story began to stir.